When you solo, you use chromatic passing chords and enclosures all the time. It's a part of the jazz sound. And actually the same goes for when you're playing jazz chords. It's a great way to add some color and movement to your comping. In this video, I'm going to show you first how you can easily, in a very visual way, start working with some chromatic passing chords, and then later in the video I'm going to take a look at how you can look at the individual voices, and that's going to teach you how you can really get to know the chords a lot better, but also really open up for a lot of interesting things in terms of moving around and creating variations on the chords that you're playing. I'm going to do this on a single major 7 chord, but also put it in context with some 2-5-1s once in a while. My name is Larsen, learn jazz, make music. The easiest way to add chromatic chords is really just to think about the chord voicing you want to play, and then you can add a passing chord to lead into that one by just moving up or down a half step or 1 fret. And in this case, if I want to use this Cmaj7 voicing, then I can use the Bmaj7 voicing, that's just a half step below it like this, and then resolve that back up. And then I can make an example like this. But of course, when you're comping, you want to think more in terms of melody, because you're playing music, you're not thinking about chord shapes and stuff like that. So you can also make this a part of a melody, for instance, like this. So here I'm using the leading chord to move from the C6 that I'm playing here, and then through the Bmaj7 up to a Cmaj7. And of course this works if you move the other way as well and you want to move up a half step. If I want to move from the Cmaj7 down to the C6, then I can make a phrase like this. Why do you write G7 when there is a 13 in there? So very often I'll write G7 and then this voicing. And that's really because when you play chords in jazz, then you are free to interpret what you want to play. You're going to be playing different things, different extensions, because you can improvise with the chords. And of course it has to fit with the music and the context, but there is really a lot of room to improvise. And I don't want to write a really specific voicing if the next chorus I'm going to be playing something completely different. That's why I write mostly just sort of basic voicings. And you can see it in these examples as well, where I'm really just mixing up the Cmaj7 and the C6 chords for tonic voicings in C major. It doesn't really matter which one you use. The only thing that can sort of be a problem is if you have a high root in the melody like this, and then you want to have a 7th under that. But you can get that to work as well. It's really just about what you think works and what the context is. And I think with this, there are rules and guidelines, but it's really sort of a personal choice, and it's a lot about taste. So whatever you come across, listen to it and see if you like it, and then go by that. I think that's a much better way to approach this. And it's really about understanding the chord in the song that you're playing it. So as I always say, in music, context is everything. Just so you can hear how this works in context and how it might sound if you use it in a song, here's a 2-5-1 where I'm using the passing chord. As you may notice in this example, then I'm actually using a different kind of resolution when I'm using the passing chord, because I'm moving from this one and then down to this one before moving to the C6. And really what happens here is then that the melody is moving down, so, but the chord is moving up. So in that way I'm sort of making it into 2 layers, and that's really tied into the next thing that we want to work with these chord voicings. As you can tell from the previous example, once you start opening up for how you let the voices resolve and move, then you get a lot more options. And in fact, you can start playing examples like this. So in the middle here, we have a chord that looks like this, so that could be like an E6 or a C#-7, but it doesn't really make a lot of sense to think of it like that. It's not like we have a progression that goes Cmaj7 to E6 to C major again. So really what's happening here is about the voices moving, and we're really thinking about how this is happening, and that's a much better way of understanding it instead of just thinking of these vertical chords. An example of that you probably already know would be the Stairway to Heaven or My Funny Valentine cliche like. Here we also have 2 voices that stay the same, and then 1 that's moving. For the major 7 voicings, we have 3 places where we can easily add some chromatic movement. We have the 7 moving down to the 6, so. And of course, when you can move down, you can also move back up. So of course, when you have, you can also do. Another one you have is the root moving up to the 9th. And you can also move from the 5th up to the 6 or 13. If we now try to understand the example, then what is happening is that I'm starting with this voicing, and then the root is moving up to the 9th, and the 13 or 6 is moving down to the 5th. And then that's happening at the same time, so you get... And we are moving from this C major 7 with a 13 to a C major 7 with a 9. And this is something that you'll come across in jazz quite often. Especially there is one version of this that's really common with bebop and even in some bebop themes. One way of using chromatic voice leading that works in a lot of different places and therefore is quite practical is to move the 7th down to the 6th and in parallel also the 9th down to the root. And this is something that I learned from a Barry Harris piano workshop, but it's also really common in harmonizations of songs like Lady Bird, where that's in the melody. If I use this on a 2-5-1 with some drop 2 voicings, then it sounds like this. Here I'm moving first the outer voices on the major 7, so we have this moving down while this middle part just stays the same. Then a C6 9. Moving down to this C major 7 with a 9, and here it's this 6 interval that's just moving down in half step, so. And of course, we have a dim chord in between each time, but it doesn't really make a lot of sense to think about this as a diminished chord and try to add some sort of function to it, because the only thing that's happening is just that we're moving voices down. Now that you've heard the bebop version of this, then we can start looking at some other variations where we start working with voices that are moving against each other. One example could sound like this. So here first just D minor to G7 altered, then I'm resolving to a C6 9, and what is happening here is that the top voice, the 9th, is moving down and the 6 is moving up. So we have first this, and then I'm ending on this C major 7. And in a way, this is the reverse version of that, just with drop 2 voicings. So first just D minor, G7 flat 9. Then I'm coming out on the C major 7. And you can hear this voicing, because we have the B under the C, it's a little bit unstable. You can use it, but it's a little bit hard to really keep it as a sustained chord. But then what happens is that it starts moving, so we have the B going down to the B flat, and the C up to the C sharp, so. And then ending on this C6 9. In this example, I'm doing something a little bit different, and you can also hear that in the 2-5-1, because when I'm resolving, then the chord that I actually start with is really not resolving at all. So what I'm doing is that I'm just taking some voices within the chord, and instead of thinking about moving from one note that works like an extension down to a chord tone, like I've done previously, then I'm just changing one note to a chromatic note, and that's really what's happening here. So I want to resolve to this C major 7 with a 9. But first I suspend the G and the E with an F sharp and a D sharp, and then I have, instead of this C major 7 that we expect, we get this sound, which of course is completely different and also really adding a lot of tension. And then it resolves, and I'm really just repeating that recipe, but then a little bit faster and a little bit smoother later by going, which is really just the same suspension. So of course you can do something with it that's a little bit less demanding for the ear, or maybe for the soloist. This is the kind of thing that'll get you fired for sure. As you can see in this video, then there are a lot of things you can do with chromatic passing chords and chromatic voice leading, but actually there are a lot of other types of passing chords that are also well worth checking out, where you can really add a lot of different colors and a lot of suspensions into your playing. And one video that's discussing 3 types of passing chords is this one, where I'm covering some different types of diminished and secondary dominant and tritone substitutions.